Okay, well, it gives me the pleasure in introducing Mark Penner. Mark Penner is one of the gentlemen that actually got me started into fishing for salmon out in Lake Ontario, and learned a ton of stuff off this guy. I don't think there's anybody that I came across, well, there's a few, yes, but I mean, this guy's full of wealth of how to fish, where to fish, what to use, what not to use, and the guy's just amazing. So, Mark, I thank you for coming out, and the floor is all yours, buddy.
All right. Thank you, Bill. Thanks, guys, for having me. I got a couple things to share on the screen, but not a lot. The slideshow is a little more just to keep me on time and on point with things in order. Yeah, very briefly about my myself and my history with Lake Ontario. I was fortunate. I grew up footsteps on the east side of Port Dalhousie Harbor, just up the hill from the Game and Fish boat ramp. So, you know, my dad fished, you know, a nice amount. He was a casual angler, but he really liked it. And we started salmon and trout fishing Lake Ontario. I think 1989 was the first year that we started. I was 9 years old. And, you know, we participated most springs in the Spring Salmon Derby, and occasionally in the Toronto Star Salmon Hunt, as it was called back in those days, for many years. And we you know, we had variable degrees of success out there. And then we kind of stopped fishing Lake Ontario for a little bit. You know, we got a trailer up in the Kawarthas, so our focus changed. You know, fishing up there for a number of years, and then after I finished school, you know, I was able to get a small boat of my own, and with the advent of the internet and online fishing forums, maybe some of you are familiar, you know, like Spoon Pullers, OFN. There was another group called the Real Buddies, where I was able to meet with other anglers and meet up with them and get out fishing together. And then I was able to kind of rekindle my love for Lake Ontario fishing. A number of the tactics had changed then from what me and my dad used to use. Back in the early 90s, we were still only limited to one rod per person on Lake Ontario. It was sometime in the mid to late 90s, I believe, where it changed to 2 rods per person in Ontario waters. So a lot had changed, and I had to, you know, learn all this new stuff, you know, divers and lead core and eventually copper and all that other kind of stuff. So, you know, getting to fish with other guys certainly helped shorten the learning curve. I was a sponge. I would attend as many of these club meetings as I could. You know, I would go often across to New York to attend all the lots of shows and those seminars as they were available, and you know, reading Great Lakes Angler magazine and all that kind of stuff. So, and then eventually, you know, I joined some other clubs. You know, this club being in particular, in 2010 I joined here, and that's where I got to know Shane a lot better. And then next thing you know, the next summer I was helping him out part-time as a mate on his charter boat, and that continued on for 9 years or so. So, and here we are. So, yeah, and I've been helping Martin at this shop now for nearly 5 years now. And it's been a great experience getting to know many of you and other people in the fishing business too. So that's enough of that, and we'll get going. I'm just going to grab my water here. A short disclaimer before I get started. You know, all the stuff that I'm discussing is stuff that I've learned and what generally works for me and those that I fish often with. There's a lot of different ways that you can catch a fish, and there's no wrong way. You eventually develop what you're confident in, and you use that, and that's fine. So, you know, I might, you know, suggest things or do things differently than you or your buddies do it, and that's okay. So there's a lot of different ways to put fish in the boat, but I'm just going to share a few of the ways that myself and those I fish with have been pretty successful with over the years. I'm going to focus mostly tonight on the early part of fishing Lake Ontario for salmon and trout, kind of where we're just starting right now. You know, probably within the next week or two, many of us will probably start poking around for some trout for a little bit until the water warms up, and then we start to get into salmon, and we'll discuss all that. And I'm going to kind of stop kind of around late April-ish, and kind of around that 50, 60 foot water, because, you know, we're going to start real shallow and then we're going to gradually work our way a little deeper as the water warms up. So that's kind of where we'll stop tonight. But for those that can kind of see, that picture was taken on Good Friday 2007. I was out fishing at the time with my buddy Jamie, and that was one of the first times that I had kind of gotten back into fishing the springtime on Lake Ontario. We were fishing kind of in that gap area between Port Dalhousie and the Welland Canal. I think we were in like 30 feet of water or so, and I can still remember that fish hit a Lure Jensen power dive. It was a silver and purple bait, good old lure that's no longer available, just on monofilament line behind our planer board 100 feet out. So that was a nice, you know, mid-size king, and that got me rejuvenated back into chasing those fish. It was a rainy day, I remember that, but it was all right. So don't mind the screen. I'll show a couple things as we need to. Again, this is more to keep me on track. So we're going to start kind of, where do they go? So we're going to backtrack to the fall, where the salmon and trout go, you know, when our season wraps up. So as we know, the mature salmon, you know, they go through their process. They run the rivers and the harbors, and they spawn and they die. Brown trout, they're fall spawners too, usually October, November. And then they drop back out to the lake. Brown trout kind of come and go from the rivers and harbors throughout the winter months, but they stay relatively shallow. You know, I seen ice huts on Jordan Harbor still this morning, in the one section there inside the Marina Basin where there is still some solid ice. I saw ice huts there, and you know, there are brown trout that are caught within that basin all winter long. We know that you can catch them in Port Dalhousie, the Niagara River, the Niagara Bar. You know, they're constantly just chasing bait fish. Lake trout, you know, they're like a November spawner. Many of them go into the Niagara River, or some spawn on the reefs and shoals of Lake Ontario. And then many of them go back out to the lake, and then they kind of hang out. Some are kind of close to shore, but I think many are kind of in that 40 to 80 foot water. That's kind of where their comfort zone is throughout the winter. Rainbows, there's some that spawn in the fall. Many are spring spawners too. So they kind of come and go from the shallows in the rivers. And you know, many of them are going to run the creeks probably in the next couple weeks once things thaw and start warming up. And the Chinooks, the ones that don't spawn, and the cohos too, they tend to winter out over deeper water where the stable water is and where a lot of the bait fish resides during the winter. There is a number of salmon. We didn't really see very many caught this year, but on the Niagara Bar. Last year, different story. At least a couple hundred salmon were caught by guys jigging, drifting the Niagara Bar area. I don't know why it didn't happen this year. It's maybe it was just too because like last year we had a lot of days where there was not a lot of wind. Many boats were able to get out and fish comfortably. This year there still were a number of nice days, but not quite like last year. So I don't have an explanation for that. But there are often a number of salmon that are not too far off of the Niagara Bar area, like the mature salmon. So they winter out deep, and then they'll come into shore as that water warms up into the 40-degree mark and onward. So where and when do we begin? Well, I know of a couple boats in the last week that have attempted to get out, trolling for brown trout. I think with minimal success. But we generally start, you know, around now for most years when we have a traditional winter like we're just coming out of. And the first little segment, we're going to focus on fishing 20 feet of water and less, because that's generally where we are. And for the most part, we're targeting brown trout. You will run into the odd rainbow that's coming or going out of the creeks as well, and maybe the odd lake trout. I will show this picture here. If you can kind of see, I snapped, I'd really like to see if I can get that full screen. I don't. Okay, that's a little better. So as you can see, I snapped this picture off Jordan many years ago. I think it was actually during the day when we used to do the Ken Fisher tournament in early mid-April. You can see we have a band here of dirty water that's inshore. And then there's a second band of water. That water, it may not appear to be, but it is nice green stained water, almost teal. And then you've got the rest of the lake water that is, blue, clear and cold. This time of year, you're not always going to have it set up like this, but this is kind of an ideal scenario. You don't always want to fish that dirt water because, there might be fish in there, but it's hard for them to see your baits. So it can be tougher. We're generally looking for that transition where it goes from dirt to that nice stained green water. And that's always going to be influenced by the wind and how it collects. We got about 40 plus miles of shoreline from Hamilton in the corner down to the Niagara River. That's, our zone that we cover. And there's, multiple boat launches and marinas that you can access from between here and there. So it's that transition water that you are primarily looking for. And that water is going to move all the time. It's been talked about in other seminars and other resources. You can use satellite imagery to get updates. You're not going to get good pictures on cloudy days. You get a nice clear day, you're going to get some clear shots. And you can kind of see where along the shoreline that nicer water is collecting, and that can help you in your pre-planning for trips. As well, you can look for surface temperature. There's a few websites too that show Lake Ontario surface temp to kind of see what areas of the lake are collecting warmer water more than others. So very, very useful to help. And we can also see, how Lake Erie is doing as far as ice coverage goes this time of year, and as well as, how that colored water is moving from Lake Erie through the Niagara River as we go throughout the springtime.
Would you know that website by any chance?
NOAA is one of them. Coast Watch. So I think there was a change in the last year, I think, with NOAA, how they were collecting all their information. But and Martin does a look at the lake daily. That'll probably be starting regularly in the next week or so. So he'll give his observations from the Beamsville area of Lake Ontario as far as, water clarity, how the wind is doing on that morning. Usually it's around just a little after sunup that he posts that. So you can always stay tuned for that. If you just do a Google search, Lake Ontario satellite image, Lake Ontario surface temperature, and that'll show you the top websites for that. So for this time of year, the early season, it's mostly browns, some rainbows. There are Lakers available. And the Lakers generally, you'll get the odd one that come in close to shore. But we're going to focus on browns for this quick segment now. So the nice thing about this early type of the season, from March through most of April, is if you have a small boat and minimal tackle, you can still get into some nice numbers of fish without having downriggers and a lot of the, let's call it specialized gear that you tend to need more so during the summer months, because the fish are close to shore and they're not very deep down. So you can get by with minimal tackle.
Shore people get these?
Absolutely. So, starting almost now, there will be brown trout accessible to shore. You get the odd lake trout too. Many years ago, like in the 80s and 90s, because as a kid I would read Ontario Fisherman magazine, Ontario Out of Doors, and they would talk about guys catching, lots of king salmon from shore, like under the lift bridge off the Skyway Pier. And even Jordan, off the rocks at Jordan, guys would catch kings. It just doesn't seem to happen anymore. The kings do come shallow, but the shore guys just don't seem to run into them. Just casting a lot of spoons, You can bank fish too if you just want to use, like if you get some live shiners or fish a roe bag, you can catch trout doing that too. But we're going to focus mostly on the boat fishing. So baits and delivery devices that we use early in that season when we're kind of 20 foot of water or less from mid-March into early April. Myself, I use a lot of monofilament line only, minimal braid, and maybe a 1 or a 2 color of lead core, more so when I'm in that 15 to 20 foot water. And it's a lot of stick baits. So I'm going to pass around throughout the talk now a few different collections of different baits that I use at these different times of the year. There's a little bit of crossover, and there will be between the 3 segments, which is kind of like early spring, mid-spring, and then late spring, where some of the depths are going to have crossover, the species we catch, and the baits that we use. So early in the spring, I like to use a lot of shorter, shallow diving stick baits, more to mimic the profile of the forage that the fish are feeding on, which is primarily like emerald shiners, some gobies, and some smelt. So it's a lot of these. So this is a Bay Rat short shallow, popular bait for many years. They went out of commission for a couple of years, but Dreamweaver just brought them back this year, so they are available again. You know, your old classic Rapala floaters. So this is an F5, so this is on the smaller side of things. But then we get into like your F9s, F7s. This is a Rapala scatter wrap, so it's got a different lip on it than the traditional floaters, so it has a real more of a darting, hunting action. I do well with this bait kind of in colored water more because it moves a lot, and I think the fish are able to kind of hone in and find it more. Your old shallow reef runners too, with short lips are good ones. So these are some of my ones that I use in colored water. A lot of green, chartreuse, and orange, and some gold as well. I'll pass these all around in a minute. Jointed baits are pretty popular too. You know, Rapalas, Rebels, Fast Tracks, whatever you can find. Again, variety of colors. If the water's a little bit cleaner, then we go with more natural colors. So a lot of more black silvers, golds, a little bit of blues in between too. A lot of the live target smelts can work very well then. I got an old Rebel here. Smithwick Rogue in a bit of a goby pattern. And you'll find too, a little more so with brown trout than the other species. What's old is new. And I find a lot of the old classic baits from the 80s and the 90s work very well for brown trout. Some spoons included. You know, when I'm at tackle swaps and stuff like that, even, you know, occasionally browsing Marketplace, I'm a sucker when I can find like these old Rebels or the old original Balsa Rapalas, because they work so good at those slower trolling speeds. Old spoons too, like I've got a couple relics here, some Suttons, Andy Reekers, some old Williams. If you can, Little Cleo used to make a light flutter spoon, like a paper thin one. Those have been gone for a long time. Those are another really good trolling spoon early in the season. So, and then we've got a few of the modern ones here. A lot of your standard Stinger spoons and Dreamweaver Super Slims. And even sometimes I'll go down to some of these little Stinger Scorpions, or the Dreamweaver has their WDs, just because they're, you know, real small, like the little shiners and the gobies that the fish are feeding on this time of year. So I'll pass around these, and you just bring them back to the end of the table after. Yeah, watch